Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is the sequel to the 2016 film, but also a sequel to the other appearances made by Doctor Strange in the MCU thus far, you know, shared universe, and everything is connected, all that jazz. This movie is about a young girl named America Chavez who has the ability to hop through different multiverses, and she is being chased for that power by these different monsters. Don't know where they're coming from. She encounters Doctor Strange from the MCU, and he is going to help her try to fix all this, get rid of these monsters, find out who's after her, and just get away from all of this madness that comes from the multiverse. Woohoo. When it comes to a new entry in the MCU, I'm always going to be excited for it, no matter what it is, really, because I've been invested in this series since I was like 7. So I have a lot of love for this franchise, obviously. So that even goes towards maybe follow-ups that I didn't really care for the original all that much for, or maybe I just thought it was okay, like, you know, Thor the Dark World, you know, I got excited for Thor Ragnarok even though I didn't really care for that. The Marvels I'm excited for, even though Captain Marvel I thought was whatever. Ant-Man and the Wasp is, you know, a decent movie. It's very light and kind of low stakes, but I'm excited for Quantumania nonetheless, and I think it's because the MCU does a really good job of seeing what works, what isn't working, and how to shift into something new to get people as excited as they would have been beforehand if, you know, there was more love for the original film. So with like Quantumania, we're getting Kang the Conqueror played by Jonathan Majors, and it seems like they're shifting from some of the other story beats they were doing before in the Ant-Man movies. So I'm excited to see that. After Thor the Dark World, they replaced Alan Taylor, you know, with Taika Waititi, who had a considerably different and more interesting style and approach to that film than any just studio hire. So, you know, that's why that was working and why Thor Love and Thunder, you know, has so many people hyped. The Marvels, you know, they got Nia DaCosta to come in and do that film after doing Candyman, the newest one. So that is exciting, more so than the creative team on the last Captain Marvel movie. So I think they do a good job of recognizing what might have been considered like one of the weaker entries, how they could potentially fix that, and then going forth and trying that out. And that was definitely the case with this movie leading into it. I'm fine with the first Doctor Strange movie. I've seen it enough times, and I feel like every single time I've watched it, I'm like, yeah, it's good, but you know, these other appearances where he shows up in the other movies are like more memorable than most of the stuff here, which is weird because this movie's not bad and it has good ideas, good imaginative visuals and all that, but it's just, there's something lacking about it that I can't really explain. I think it's just a lot of like, you know, solo origin stuff, and you get a lot of the, you know, expected things, and it's not really done with any, you know, style or anything that interesting, and just a lot of going through the motions. But when they announced that this sequel was going to be helmed by Sam Raimi because Scott Derrickson left the project to do The Black Phone, that's when I was like, okay, if this goes well, you know, Sam Raimi could really get his hooks into this and do something interesting with this property, because Sam Raimi is that kind of director who, you know, has his own quirks, has his own style, and he could really do something fun with this. I really hope that they let him. And they did. This is definitely one of the best directed MCU films I've seen, I think, ever. It's weird because I don't think I would consider Multiverse of Madness one of my top MCU films, in my opinion. Just like, I don't think it even gets into like my top 10. But as far as like its direction, it is just so fucking cool. Everything about this movie, just one word kept repeating in my head: cool. This is so cool. Sam Raimi makes this movie at parts like it is an Evil Dead movie. Doctor Strange might as well be played by Bruce Campbell. There's just so many cool sorcery fights where Doctor Strange does cool sorcery stuff that I didn't know he could do, because it seems like a lot of the times he shows up, he's doing the orange circle stuff, or, you know, he's splitting off into different bodies and they're floating around. Just seeing all the stuff that he could do, like, you know, he unleashed stuff like from inside of his cape, or like similar to like What If, where he was like absorbing things and unleashing them later. He did something kind of like that in this. He unleashed like these weird monster hands and started grabbing stuff off the street to beat up a monster. He has a music fight with someone in this movie where they just pluck off little musical notes from a sheet and start having like a music fight. It's incredibly fun, and it's so cool and really well thought out. It's not just, okay, let's just have them throw magic at each other. It's, well, what's the coolest way of doing that? And what's the coolest way we can pan the camera? What's the coolest way that we can edit this dialogue, this exposition scene, to show, you know, what's happening right now? Sam Raimi made every single great choice to just match up what he wants to see and what I wanted to see as an audience member. He really nailed it, and it created quite the fun experience, especially when it dives into the more horror campy elements of it all. And speaking of the action, I wanted to once again mention how like the third act of this movie, similar to how like the first Doctor Strange has an interesting third act, because they solve a problem by, you know, being smart instead of blasting a billion magic bolts at it. And in this, I wouldn't say it's like up to like the Dormammu I've come to bargain bit, but I think they do, once again, a good job of just solving a problem by just being smart and being like, we don't have to, you know, shoot a million bolts at everything. We can do interesting stuff and, you know, save the day, you know, stop the villain by just confronting them with their own decisions and their own actions, you know? I really love that about this. I'm telling you, like, Doctor Strange, like, when it comes to, like, their third acts and solving the villain problem, I think they do a really good job with that. Scarlet Witch, I'm just gonna let you know, Elizabeth Olsen is fantastic in this movie. She has a really great continuation from WandaVision. It's one of those things where I was kind of thinking, one of my biggest issues with this movie, I don't consider it like a big hindrance on everything, but I will say that I think there are some points where they could have just let some things flesh out a bit more. There are certain elements of plot that feel a little rushed, like, well, wait, how does this character know that? Why is this character just already here? You know what I mean? But it's not a big hindrance because I can see how it can happen. I'm just kind of missing some section of the in-between that I kind of already get, but with just like some confirmation. But I think the Scarlet Witch continuation for her character arc in this was actually really interesting, because if you've seen the end of WandaVision, I don't want to give too much away, but they kind of leave, you know, pieces at the end of that meld perfectly into what her story arc is in this, and it's one of the most interesting storylines for an MCU character in these movies. You know, Scarlet Witch has just, you know, easily become one of the most fleshed out, you know, most developed characters in the entire series. So I was really glad to see what they did with her in this, and Elizabeth Olsen stole the show. She's genuinely terrifying at certain points, and they do such a cool job with illustrating her powers and what it is she can do. Like, there's one shot, like pretty early on, I want to say first act, there's one shot where she does something similar to what she did in Age of Ultron. But the scene in this is like the way cooler version of that. It was just so cool, and it genuinely started to haunt me. I was like, God, this is so, like, this is genuinely so kind of spooky. I wouldn't say like it's so horrifying you're gonna be traumatized for life, but like, you know, someone like me who likes horror movies and likes seeing directors, you know, take these approaches to jump scares and, you know, scary sequences and interesting visuals, you know, I was just on the edge of my seat, always anticipating Scarlet Witch to come back, because what the fuck is she gonna do next? And I say all this stuff about Elizabeth Olsen, but I do want to, you know, clarify that this is still a Benedict Cumberbatch movie. He still has a good story arc in this, continuing what we've already seen from Doctor Strange. He learned to let go of like his ego in the first Doctor Strange movie, and we've seen him help people and kind of be annoyed that everyone else is fucking up the program or not doing it exactly as, you know, he needs to. You know, he's very much so like, I know what I'm doing, don't get in my way. And in this movie is kind of about continuing that arc and letting him kind of be open to help and kind of confronting what it is exactly that scares him about that, what exactly scares him about the comfort of another human being. And it's very, it's not like over the top, like beat you over the head dramatic or anything like that, but it is portrayed with such a sincerity, and Benedict Cumberbatch is just so good as this character that, you know, there comes a point where he says something that is like a childhood thing that happened to his character, and it just explained so much to me about that character, and it completely kind of revitalized the way I looked at him from the start, even from the first Doctor Strange, because I watched that movie before going into this, which was like, what a tonal shift, by the way, going into like, you know, the new Doctor Strange after watching the original, and it's like, okay, yeah, they're doing the magic stuff, and then in this, it's like, holy shit, the magic stuff is so much better, you know? I think a lot of it is just like, not to diss on Scott Derrickson's directing or anything, but that was like, I believe, a first time like big movie like that. You know, he'd done Sinister and Exorcism of Emily Rose, all good horror movies, but you know, they're not like big to the level of like the Doctor Strange movie budget was. So a lot of it does kind of feel like, well, the computer artist set up like this kind of scenario for an action scene, and you know, second unit's got a good handle on it, so you just got to come in and direct them talking, dude. But in this, it really does feel like they let Sam Raimi kind of go at it like, hey, whatever you want to do, dude, let us know. We've got you. I don't think it's any surprise to anyone that, yes, there are cameos in this. It's kind of all put into like just this one stretch of the movie. And I feel like I've heard a lot of people start complaining like it's barely even a Doctor Strange movie. It's more just like a Disney presentation of what's next on the slate. You know, it's not really a Doctor Strange movie. It's just about these cameos. But I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with that, or if even if it was, if I even care that much, if they're just trying to plug other shit. Because for this story, I thought the inclusion of these cameos, well, I won't spoil anyone specific, but I thought they made sense. And also the way that they concluded that part of the story was fucking brilliant. You know, it was so goddamn fun, so funny too. Sam Raimi has kind of like a sick kind of sense of humor, especially when it comes to his heart. Like there's a point where like a zombie corpse gives an emotional pep talk and even does like a little wink with the camera right up in his face. It's hilarious. and it's all intentional. It's not like they're trying to actually be like sincere, but this goofy thing is happening. It's like, no, Sam Raimi definitely knows that, yeah, this is ridiculous, but it's awesome, right? So even though there are cameos, I would still say that this is a Sam Raimi movie first, and those cameos then serve the purposes of Sam Raimi's overall goal in this movie, directing-wise. So, I didn't really have a problem with it. I thought it fit well for the story, and then, they did not overshadow anything from Doctor Strange. They did not take over the movie. It's not like the No Way Home, we have to give Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire arcs, but it kind of makes sense for them, because, we're seeing them again, and they have other movies and all that stuff. These cameos don't overtake the movie, though, or have anything like that, because that's not important. Doctor Strange is. They never lose sight of that. Even like a new character like America Chavez, I've heard some complaints that like, oh, she's just kind of like a human MacGuffin, and that's kind of true. That is kind of the purpose of that character, but at the end of the day, there is some kind of motivation backing her. There is like a backstory to her that makes you interested. It makes you kind of question like, what is this all about? And it doesn't really have much to do with like the rest of the story, how it unfolds, because obviously this is all connected, and there's going to be, side projects and, sequels. They'll probably get into more detail with that character as it goes on. But I can't wait to see more of that, because in this movie, they gave me a really special character. I didn't know anything about America Chavez. I got introduced to her through this movie. And I think the actress is really stellar at this part, and I can't wait to see more of Xochitl Gomez as this character. Not that I was surprised that they got Rachel McAdams back, but I think I was surprised that she had as much to do in this movie as she did. I wasn't really expecting much. But she, has time to really play and interact, and I think how they include her character as well, works towards the benefit of the Stephen Strange arc, but it also speaks a lot about, her character and their dynamic. I thought it was really special. I've also heard some complaints that like the script needed more rewrites, it's messy, it's bogged down because it's an MCU writer and Sam Raimi elevates it. And if I'm being honest, like, I don't think it's really messy or that it's really all that bad. Michael Waldron is the guy who wrote it. He's written like a couple episodes of Rick and Morty, something like that, and he also was a big head writer on The Loki Show, which is my favorite Disney Plus Marvel show thus far, even after Moon Knight. So I didn't really find his script to be all that like messy or like bad. I think it was just surprisingly simplistic and not like end of the world biggest stakes you've ever felt. It's like, no, we have stakes for this kind of pocket of the MCU, the magic sorcery stuff. But it's not like a big grand scale event, because it's about these characters and, learning more about like Doctor Strange and, seeing what is Wanda going through currently. So I thought it was pretty simplistic, but it was a simplistic that works for the characters, and it works for how Sam Raimi was going to direct the movie. Obviously the direction is going to elevate the script, because Sam Raimi's direction is like top tier. You know what I mean? Like there's so many fantastic visual effects moments. There's great costume design and practical sets, the way they design some of these other multiverses they go to. It looks very incredible, but even that, it's not even really, completely focused on like, whoa, what's going on in this universe? Let's go over here and learn all this other stuff. It still stays focused on, okay, well, these characters do have a goal. It involves the multiverse, but they're going about it this way because this is the way that makes sense. This is the way they have to. It's important for the characters and the overall story. I didn't really have much of a problem with this script. I thought, for what they had to do, they did a solid job with that. Like, the only things I really found wrong with this movie were, like, what I mentioned before, how there's just some things maybe they could have, spaced out a bit story-wise just to let some breathing room in. But even then, it's kind of like a minor complaint about the story and the pacing. The only other thing I could say negatively about this movie is that there's just some visual effects parts that could look a little iffy, you know, in a movie that mostly looks fantastic. You know, there's just some parts where it's like, I don't know. This is kind of a complaint that you could have with like any MCU movie though, and even like any Sam Raimi movie. So it's kind of like, yeah, that was to be expected kind of thing about this movie. I just had a really fun time with it. You know, I walked in, you know, excited to see another MCU movie, but wanting, like, I hope Sam Raimi can, you know, get away with something really cool too. And it surpassed my expectations because Sam Raimi does go full on horror. He does go full on his style. I heard someone complain that like the Sam Raimi quirks and style was like really over exaggerated, and I'm not sure how you can feel that way because this movie is definitely just at a point it just starts to become a Sam Raimi movie pretty early on, and it does not let up even like to the very end of the movie. I would say it lets up before the two final post-credit scenes, but even then there's something in the post-credits that's like, that's fun. That's funny. I'm gonna give Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness an A-. I had a really fun time with this. It was a ton of fun watching Sam Raimi just go full ham and just, you know, go all out and have fun behind the camera, but also, you know, having a keen focus on like, okay, well, this story is about these characters and their emotions, and we're never gonna lose sight of that, even with the studio cameo stuff, you know, even that is going to serve me, Sam Raimi, at the end of the day with a really fantastic sequence that I absolutely love. The action is so much fun, the visual effects, the design work, the practical stuff, the musical score by Danny Elfman, him working with Sam Raimi again, wonderful. I will say I missed the that like one instrument, I believe like a harpsichord that Michael Giacchino put into the score, that kind of like iconic sound that you associate Strange with. It's not here, kind of a bummer, but at the end of the day, Elfman music is one of the things I'm just easy to fall over because I love Elfman's just like whimsical, light, adventurous stuff. If you've seen Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.